Hello and welcome to YAGR, your one-stop shop for high-quality game reviews. Today we'll be doing our final verdict on Agents of Mayhem by Deep Silver Volition Games, a company that's brought us great games such as the Saints Row series and Red Faction. Our playthrough team has about 13 to 14 hours of in-game playtime, plenty to understand what this game has in store for folks. So we're going to go over some of the issues that we've had, we're going to go over some of the things that we particularly liked about the game, and then we're going to wrap up with our thoughts on what kind of gamer would enjoy Agents of Mayhem, so you can make the best decision possible for yourself and your wallet. So, first off, some of the things that we really liked playing through Agents of Mayhem here at YAGR. Well, I guess first off, we'll go over what was just displayed on screen, and that's the contract system. We thought that was kind of clever. It's definitely no replacement for multiplayer, but basically it adds sub-objectives of things you're already going to do, but you might have to go out of your way to get to the degree to which the contracts ask you, and it just gives you bonus loot, resources, etc. to progress through the game at a little bit faster pace than you would otherwise. It is certainly not required, but it's a nice little touch that you can pop in and take part in. And when I say take part in, I very much mean so, because many of these contracts have such high number values of enemies to kill, types of kills to get, pieces of loot to collect, etc., that you wouldn't be able to do it on your own very effectively. But you can queue in to complete contracts with other players online. You don't get to play with them, and frankly, it doesn't really change the progress of your game whatsoever when you're completing them, but it helps you have that feeling of camaraderie, and it also definitely thematically helps the game, because it seems like you're helping other stations of the Agents of Mayhem around the world complete a fight against the elements of Legion. So I thought that was kind of cool when you look at it from a thematic perspective, and that might have been missed on some people. And also, it's just kind of nice to be able to get more free shit in-game. So, never going to complain about that. We thought that was kind of cool here at YAGR. Another thing we liked was the simple but effective and very diverse combat that the player has at their disposal. You have a whole plethora of different characters you can play that grows as you play through the game. And they each have, at least at their core, some pretty different play styles. You can see right now we're playing an archer with a stealth ability, and then our team also consists of a guy with an assault rifle that is pretty much run and gun, and you get a lot of bonuses from firing from the hip. Then we also have the guy with the shotgun that pulls people towards him and is pretty tanky. But in addition to that, there's characters that have completely and entirely different playstyles. Like, one is all about freezing your gun over, which is an ice cannon, and then when it's frozen over, you do additional damage with your melee attack, or your special abilities get a new effect. So there's very much these different playstyles based off what heroes you bring to the field. And we thought the diversity and variety kept the game from getting a little bit too repetitive and unfun of just, you know, spam clicking your gun at people or whatever it happens to be. So, the diversity and variety of combat is pretty much dependent on the player, which we thought was kind of cool. It gives the player a lot of extra control. The reason this is important, though, is because of some of the negative things that we're going to get into, but at least the positive aspect of compensating for the problem that we'll discuss later was done effectively. You very much feel like you have plenty of options. It's going to address a lot of different people's playstyles as long as they enjoy the base concept of the game. And we thought that was awesome, and we here at YAGR played with a bunch of different kinds of combinations of teams. Some work well together, some don't, and it's fun to experiment as the player. So, great there, super enjoyable when you can kind of combine and customize what your active team is. On top of that, one of the other things we ended up liking by the end of it was the upgrade and customization system when it comes to abilities, skills, and passive effects on the hero. One of the corrections we'd like to make from our deep dive was we said a lot of the Gremlin and Legion tech, which are the 3 to technically 6, I don't really want to say buffs, they're more like ability adjustments, customizations. We said that a lot of them come with trade-offs. Actually, very few of them come with trade-offs. Most of them are just flat bonuses or changing the way the skill works at a base level. A good example, if you're wondering, is Hardtack, the shotgun guy, can throw a harpoon that initially when you get him pulls the target directly in front of Hardtack. Very useful for a shotgun guy. But you can get gremlin tech that changes that so that it pushes them away and ends in an explosion or roots them in place, things like that. So it changes the base functionality of the skill, not necessarily how it's used, but what it does for you. And that's really neat, because then you can invent even further your own play styles through the game. So ultimately, it depends on how you want to build and how you want to change throughout the game. That's going to determine whether you're doing the same exact thing over and over again from the character perspective. It can be repetitive, but we'll save that for the con section here. Another thing that we liked about the game is it felt like there were plenty of unlocks to go around and try and collect, from skills to unlocking vehicles to even just going around collecting money in order to buy the next upgrade to buff your team. There was a good level of progression. It reminded us a lot of Saints Row, where there were a lot of small little things that you could do that ended up building up into having a more complete character or a more complete organization. Particularly in Saints Row 3 and 4, of course. 4 especially has some similarities to this, where you're constantly upgrading and bettering your characters. So they stuck to their guns with that, and I think it served them well. In fact, it may have served them even better in this game, because that is literally what this game is about, is being an organization of quote-unquote heroes and getting stronger while you fight your enemy. So we thought that was done well, as this company has shown to do well in the past. It wasn't particularly ingenuitive or unique or game industry changing, but that doesn't mean it was bad. It was done solidly, and we enjoyed it. The story is getting a little bit more compelling and more involving the longer we play. Again, from a character perspective, it's making a lot of sense, and we think that's good continuity-wise, but from a player perspective, there's still a lot of things that we as a player have not been given information on. So while that might sound like a con, it is getting better as the game progresses. So the longer you put hours into it, the more you as the player feel invested in what you're doing. That might be because you've just simply been putting your own time into it, and you're also building your characters the way you want, so you feel some responsibility as the player to what happens. But the point is, it's getting better slowly over time. It shouldn't be a problem in the first place. The player should feel invested and immersed, but the fact that it improves should be marked as a pro. The longer you play, the more invested you as the player become. Those are some of the serious upsides to the game. Overall, the gameplay is just enjoyable and visceral. You're running around causing explosions, shooting things, punching people. It's great. The actual combat system is perfectly fine. All of the mechanics within the game work well. No serious complaints there. It's pretty enjoyable if this is your cup of tea kind of game, the run and gun, crazy explosion shoot 'em ups. If you're more of a stealthy, puzzly kind of person, it's definitely going to be way off base for you. There is not much else besides a little bit of platforming and a lot of bit of shooting. So, keeping that in mind, we're going to run into the cons, or the things that we didn't necessarily like very much within the game. One of the things that really bothered us the most was the over-the-top graphics and effects and the fairly close camera to your player model. It was very difficult to basically stay on task in the middle of big fights. You would lose your place sometimes with your camera. You're not going to be able to lock onto anything, most certainly, and that can be a problem when you're fighting high mobility enemies with a lot of explosions and things going on, like at least one of the particular boss fights in the game, as well as some of just the standard fights. You end up in these rooms, these Legion corridors that you can see with all these explosive components around you. They start blowing up, enemies have explosive components and those start blowing up, your camera starts shaking, which albeit you can turn off in the options menu, however, it's pretty jarring, and then there's all kinds of different flashy effects and things, and you can get lost in it, and your camera's going to be bumping into walls. The camera control overall isn't necessarily the problem, it's the over-the-top graphical effects of the different abilities and events that happen around you. It is difficult to stay on task, especially without a lock-on feature, but it's a shooter game, so you can't have a lock-on feature. That wouldn't make any sense. So it's not asking for a lock-on feature we're doing here, we're just saying maybe tone down the graphics Like, it's fun to see all the craziness, but the explosion effects and all the things going on, you get lost in it. That being said, it never caused a true problem that made us not be able to complete a mission or anything, but it got annoying when you were trying to do something a little bit more precise and it wasn't available to you because of how the game was built. So that was one of our big complaints. Another complaint that we've hit on in all of our videos about this game thus far, and we're going to mention again, is the vehicle system. We are so disappointed that the vehicle system is as simple and unentertaining as it is in this game. Saints Row 3, the vehicle system was great. It was, to a degree, customizable. You could do a lot of fun things with it. The handling was excellent. In this game, it's basically a way for you to get around the city faster, quote-unquote. The reason we say that is sometimes going over buildings is going to be way faster than driving around the streets. Some of the vehicles look cool, but a lot of them are copy and paste. And on top of that, basically the vehicles have different base stats of toughness, agility, and I think speed. And that's it. That's as far as the customization goes. There's a couple of skins you can slap on there, and you've got, I think it's like 7 different vehicles you can do, and vehicle combat is literally just bumping enemy vehicles off the road. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it kind of works, but they don't blow up. It's really weird, and they explain what it is, but the problem is it's so simple that there's no play around with it. With a game that has so many degrees of customizability when it comes to the heroes, and a company that knows how to do vehicles well, the handling on the vehicles is average at best, and the things you can do with them is extremely limited. The vehicles were a huge level of disappointment in Agents of Mayhem. Albeit, the game is supposed to be about the heroes, but I mean, heroes have cool vehicles. Batman's Batmobile, Wonder Woman's Invisible Jet. Come on. You can have some cool vehicles available in the game. We could definitely see DLC and expansion later for this game in more ways than one. Maybe that's something that they could throw in. That would be kind of cool and make up for that. But as of now, the way the game stands, the vehicles were a huge disappointment. Another thing we weren't a serious fan of is, and this goes back to the repetitiveness comment mentioned earlier, combat as well as the activities you do can and will get a little repetitive. Regardless of how much you try to customize your heroes and make it feel different on your end, what you will be doing is different, but the actual activity you're sent to go do it's from a fairly limited list of things to do. You can see now that we're running through a Legion Lair is what it's called. This is one of the couple events you can do. And it's basically a series of randomly generated and connected rooms with increasingly difficult fights within them and more environmental stuff to have to worry about. It's simple, it's straightforward, and it makes sense, but after the second, third, maybe if you're really patient, fourth one, it's just running through the motions of doing the same thing again, and it's not great. It's kind of disappointing. That's pretty much all we have to say about that. There's a couple different activities, such as setting up meet points for your fellow organization members to go meet up with them, securing a source of income, and then there's some races. There's some rooftop races and some vehicle races, and after that it's pretty much just different ways of doing the same thing of fight these guys, destroy this structure, fight these guys, save this civilian, and that's basically what the activities consist of outside of the main storyline. The main storyline might have a couple different nuances to basically the same formula, but overall it's repetitive, and the limited number of enemy types that you fight, which basically consists of big robots, smaller people with guns, smaller people with knives, and turrets, is unfortunately uninspired and reasonably limited. Now, there's some other subtypes and a couple different things that they can do, which helps alleviate it from now and then, and also the composition of the enemies you fight does help alleviate it, but overall, it's more or less the same kind of repetitive action. this holds true for previous games this company has made, but at least there was such an insane degree of ridiculousness as well as customization on the player's end that you didn't notice it. While there is a high level of customization on the player's end in this, it does not prevent you from noticing the limited number and type of activities as well as enemies to fight. So repetition is a little bit of a struggle. If you're not into the grind, you're definitely going to notice this, and it might upset you. So those were the three major downsides that we had to the game. Again, a quick moment on performance. We here at YAGR did not have any issues running this game at any point. However, that doesn't mean you won't. Definitely check system requirements and check out a few other people's opinions on the game and what kind of systems they were running, and make a judgment call for yourself as to whether this game is going to run for you, because performance issues are a big thing. I guess quickly we will re-mention what we had talked about at length in the deep dive, and that is pop-in distance is another thing we really had a problem with in this game. When things pop in at extremely short distances from you, it breaks your enjoyment of the game, because you stop and look at that and say, why was I not able to see that from a block down the street? That doesn't make any sense. On top of it having mechanical impacts on your gameplay, that's a problem too. So that should be noted again in the cons section, but we've already talked at length about it. Overall, the game has some very powerful strong points. The progression system of upgrading is very fun. The actual combat itself is high action, fast-paced, enjoyable stuff. There's some cool little neat passive things going on with the contract system and sending agents out to go do other location missions and things like that. And there's some challenge mode stuff that you can do and customizable difficulty, stuff like that. And it does the things that it does well, very well. And that's good. The problem is when you weigh it against the cons that we're dealing with. And these cons are serious game-impacting problems where it literally impacts the amount of fun you are able to have in the game on top of how the game performs mechanically. And those two things being the effect of these causal negatives in the game seriously detracts on everything the game does well. And I think that's where people are picking on Agents of Mayhem a little bit from, is it does some great things, but all the negatives that it does detract so much from the great things. So the game ends up feeling like just an average game, and you miss out on what it does really well because of what it does poorly. So, I mean, basically it's a rule of averages. You can do a bunch of stuff well, but if you also do a bunch of stuff bad, you're only going to look mediocre. Unfortunately, it's the truth of the world, so Agents of Mayhem is just going to have to accept that, and without some serious content patches, or at least reasonably priced DLC, then the game's not going to get out of its slump that everyone is seeing it in. It's really too bad, because if you are a person such as myself personally who enjoy these kinds of games where it's pretty much just run and gun, feels a little grindy, but you can also zone out to a degree, and it's pretty much constant stimulation of having to go do these things and constantly being in this conflict. If you enjoy things like that, then you will get your kicks out of Agents of Mayhem. You certainly will get your money out of it. But if you're someone that wants to be a little bit more cerebral at times, or have a nice balance of gameplay with stealth and thought as well as serious levels of action and things like that, then this is going to leave you wanting pretty severely. So I guess overall what we'd like to say about Agents of Mayhem is we personally enjoyed it. We're not going to call this a masterpiece of a game, but we would say it's a pretty great game. But we also understand that a significant number of people aren't going to enjoy it, or are going to feel like they didn't get what they wanted out of the game. Those kinds of people are going to be the ones that want a little bit more complex of a game, a little bit more involved of a game. Something that has a meaningful progression system instead of a series of putting points in and unlocking different things. So if you want to feel like your character has grown massively every time you put a point in, you're not going to get that feeling. It's going to take a couple levels, and then you'll start seeing the effects on your character being more effective. Stuff like that. So basically, if you want a more complex, more feedback-based game or something that has anything other than action, this game is not going to provide it to you. So if you as a gamer are in desperate need of a good storyline or a really cerebral level of gameplay or anything like that, this game won't provide it to you. But if you're someone who's looking for something that's really fun to just run in, go through a bunch of action, have a couple laughs, try to learn a little bit of a very simple high-level story, things like that, then this game will absolutely hit home for you. It's a great lay back and enjoy and just relax game. But it's not something that's going to challenge you as the player particularly, and it's not going to fulfill any deep desires outside of maybe a grindy, high-action, fast-paced game feel. So take that into consideration when you decide to buy your game. Again, by all means, this game is not bad. In fact, we at YAGR think it's a great game. We're probably going to continue playing it even after the review is done. But it is definitely not going to be the game everyone was hoping it would be. So, keep that in mind when you're browsing your Steam pages and Agents of Mayhem pops up, and we hope that this review and our opinions have been helpful in making your decision onto whether to pick up Agents of Mayhem. That being said, this has been the YAGR team on our final verdict for Agents of Mayhem. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you online soon.